Christians love to run away from the slavery debate when it comes to their God. And then they try to make modern day employee-employer into what slavery was in the Bible. And they're so wrong. And then some of the worst ones try to say that where you're a slave to the government. I'm going to cover each one of those things. Now, I know in your first statement, you talked about something that you and I have talked about multiple times, and it was discussed on the previous video to which you're commenting on Facebook. But your second statement of saying that slave was necessary for the weak and for the unskilled because they was in debt slavery. True, Leviticus 25 does speak of that. But it's speaking of that in relation to an Israelite towards another Israelite. It is not speaking of that as far as an Israelite to someone of a foreign nation. When you continue to read on Leviticus 25, it expressly says that of the foreign nations around amongst you and the foreigners amongst you, you may buy your slaves and own them as property and pass them down to your sons as property, meaning that you own them for life until the slave dies. Not until the master dies, until the slave dies. So you trying to equivocate a job and a slave, a job as being a slave, is void as hell. Here's why. One question would get rid of that. And that is this. My third great grandfather, Jack Reed, was a slave in Virginia. Could he decide one day, I'm just going to walk off this plantation and I'm not going to be a slave anymore. I'm just leaving the farm. I'm no longer your slave. I'm going to go and hire myself out somewhere else. No, Jack Reed could not have done that. If Jack Reed would have done that, Jack Reed would have been subject to being murdered. He'd have been subject to being captured. He would have been subject to being beaten. He would have been subject to even harsher treatment and harsher labor. But as an employee, Lorenzo Reed, when I worked for New Horizons Computer Learning Center, when I decided that the nepotism at this company is too great for me to be here and is stymieing my ability for growth, and I went across town and started working for Solid Computer Decisions, could New Horizons have come and told me that I had to come back, that I had to work for them? Could they have beaten me? Could they have tortured me? No, they could not. That's the difference between being a slave and being an employee, is that I had the ability of determining my own work, where I was going to work. I had agency of self. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, Jack Reed, did not have agency to determine where and when he was going to work and whom he was going to work for. That's slavery. And your Bible approves of that slavery. Your Bible says that you can take those foreigners and make them into your slaves. And that's just not the Bible. That was all over the world, except for the last, 150, 200 years? When the Dahomey conquered the Vayuda and then enslaved them and then sold many of them, over 1 million of them, to the Portuguese. That was the slavery of the Bible. The Dahomey, even though they look alike, the Dahomey and the Vayuda, the Dahomey was a different tribe than the Vayuda, and so they sold them as slaves to the Portuguese. When the British enslaved the Scots and the Irish, and they sold them as slaves for life. When the Romans enslaved the Britons, they sold them. They were slaves for life. When they enslaved the Germanians, they were slaves for life. Early in Indian history, when the Northern Indians, which I forgot their tribal name, they enslaved the Davidians. They enslaved them for life. They didn't have an option. They had no agency. That is the slavery of your Bible. Not the when somebody is in debt and they become a debt slave. Now, is that true today still with employee-employer? Because somebody's going to say, well, you're in debt, you got to have that job. Is it really the same? Is it really? Many of you are walking around right now and you have collections on your credit. Now, it's on your credit. It keeps your credit score down, but you can still live. You can still buy a house, and you can wait 7 years and never pay that debt and it'll fall off. Are you truly a debt slave? Are they forcing you to go to work? There's only certain time frames when your wages are garnished. But for the most part, if you owe one of these credit collection agency money, they don't have any agency over you, where they can stop you from working, where they can force you, most of the times they can't. 99% of the time, all they do is sit there and hope and pray that one day you want to buy a house or a car or something like that, and your credit score needs to be higher and you want to get that thing off your credit. So it's not even the same when you have debt, and you can still move around and decide where you're going to live and where you're going to work. And for those of you who say that you're a slave to the government, I just last night, spent an hour business coaching a young man who is in Ghana right now. When I first met him about 6 years ago, he was here in America. He got tired of America and saw business opportunities over in Ghana, and he picked his shit up and he left America. He went to Ghana. He opened up a bakery. He's now building out to open up another type of business, another retail shop, popcorn shop at that. How is he a slave to the American government? How is he a slave to the government? He's not. He picked his shit up and left. And if he doesn't like the government in Ghana, guess what else he can do? He can pick his shit up and leave again. He can pick his shit up and move to whatever country he decides that is more favorable to him. So therefore, he is not a slave of the government. Yes, we have governments no matter where you go, and you have to obey the laws of those governments. But you are not enslaved to those laws because you have agency to choose where you go and what you do. So no. In America, the only people who are slaves are those who commit felonies and they wind up in prison because of the 13th Amendment. If you read down into it, those are the only ones who are enslaved in this country. Beyond that, you're not. The biggest enslavement that you have is the enslavement of your mind. And it works in many different ways. Like I was saying before, if you mess up your credit and you don't fix it, then you are enslaved to the credit problems that you created. You bought whatever it is, you financed whatever it is and didn't pay it. So now it's something you have to deal with. You created that situation. You are spending more money than you earn. So you created your own debt, and you created and put yourself in that position. When I was in my early 20s, I'm the one who created a whole bunch of bills where my budget was, where my expenses were 112% over the amount of money that I was bringing into the house. So what did I do? I started a cleaning company. And I made money, and I started selling products. Don't tell anybody, but I would take my alcohol vouchers and I'd buy Jack Daniels and sell it to the Germans. I would have people send me Levi jeans from America where I can sell them for $70 in Germany instead of the $30 that I paid for them. Yes, this is in the early 90s. Those prices aren't around anymore. But I made decisions to get myself out of debt and to get on a budget and and that's when I developed my 70-10-10-10 plan, so that I wasn't creating my own debt slavery. But none of those companies, that calling card company that I owed $1,200 to, yeah, they put it on my credit back then, but they couldn't force me to pay them. Because I knew I wanted to buy a house when I moved from Germany, I got all those things squared away. I gave myself my own freedom. You see, when you're a slave, the only way you can get freedom is to die, or hopefully your master is good enough to let you have your freedom, or hopefully your master is good enough to let you work and buy your freedom. If you read Uncle Tom's Cabin and you actually study who the story is about, I think his name is Josiah Henson. Josiah realized that his master was never going to free him, because once he saved up enough money to buy his freedom, which was about $1,000, his master tricked him. So the only way he got his freedom was he ran away and escaped to a place where slavery was illegal. So unless you're going to run away, you did not have agency. But you have all the agency in the world today. So please stop comparing your employer and you being the employee to slavery. And as far as work harder, not smarter, come on, man. 99% of the people are not equipped or have the fortitude to be business owners. Plus, the majority of people cannot be business owners, because then who would be the customers? It doesn't work that way. Economics in no country at no time and no form of economics will ever work that way, where the overwhelming majority of people are business owners. Most people, the best they can do is be an employee. You just have to determine how high of an employee you want to be. So subscribe to the channel, and always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.